turn back to Deuteronomy chapter 1. Beginning at verse number 22. And the New Revised Standard says this: all of you came to me and said, let us send men ahead of us to explore the land for us and bring back a report to us regarding the route by which we should go up and the cities we will come to. The plan seemed good to me, and I selected 12 of you, one from each tribe. They set out, went up into the hill country, and when they reached the valley of Eshcol, they spied it out and gathered some of the land's produce. They brought back a report to us and said, it is a good land that the Lord our God is giving us. But you were unwilling to go up. You rebelled against the command of the Lord your God. You grumbled in your tents and said, it is because the Lord hates us that he has brought us out of the land of Egypt to hand us over to the Amorites to destroy us. Where are we headed? Our kindred have made our hearts melt by reporting the people are stronger and taller than we. The cities are large and fortified up to heaven. We actually saw their offspring of the Akan. I said to you, have no dread or fear of them. The Lord your God, who goes before you, is the one who will fight for you, just as he did for you in Egypt before your very eyes. And in the wilderness, where you saw how the Lord your God carried you, just as one carries a child all the way that you traveled until you reached this place. But in spite of this, you have no trust in the Lord your God, who goes before you on your way to seek out a place for you to camp in fire by night and cloud by day, to show you the route you should take. I want to talk from the topic, I will not make the same mistake twice. I will not make the same mistake twice. Y'all gonna pray with me? Y'all gonna loosen up a little bit? I know the text is kind of deep, but let me give a Wednesday night review for those that have not shown up on Wednesday night. On Wednesday night, we talked about the same Israelites who always seem to have issues. And for whatever reason, these Israelites, these ones that we always study, have, it seems like, a mental complex. You see, the Israelites are praising God usually because they are blessed beyond measure. They have the ability to be blessed by God in ways that other nations and other people cannot even begin to imagine. And every time they seem to be blessed, it's at that moment that the Israelites take for granted what God does. And usually on the verge of God fulfilling things that he said he was going to fulfill, suddenly, they decide all of a sudden God can't do what he says he's going to do. You see, when you read the same account in Numbers, that is the original account in detail about how this all took place. In Numbers 13, you'll discover that this is the same story, that Moses was approached by the people. They were on the verge of entering into the promised land, and the people said, well, just before we go in, how about we send some spies just to check out and see what it looks like? Moses, being a good leader, says, hey, there's nothing wrong with spying out the land, getting a sneak preview, so I'm going to send 12 of you to do it. So the 12 go, and in that text in Numbers, it says that they went into the land, and they were in the land for 40 days. They were in a land God had promised them for 40 days. Let me emphasize that a little bit deeper. They were in the midst of their promise before they had to fight anybody for 40 whole days. They walked around, they saw it, they saw the fruit, they saw the land, they saw the cities, they saw all kinds of things. And somehow, some way, those 12 that went in to spy the land did not get touched one time by their enemies. They stayed in the promise for 40 whole days. Their whole mission was to look out, see how the cities were set up, see how the fruit was produced, see all that they needed to see in the land, come back with a report, and bring some of the fruit. They did this, and once they made this happen, they came to Moses, and Moses said, well, it's time for the report. Much like any normal church business meeting in any church anywhere. He stood and said, okay, I need the report. So the 12 men agreed on one thing. The land was as God said it was. They said it was fruitful. They called it a land flowing with milk and honey. Yes. They called it a land that was as beautiful as it could possibly be. They said the cities, yes, they were fortified, but the land looks good to us. So the time came now to make a motion to what? Go into the land. And it was time now to possess what God had promised. Yeah. And at the moment they had to make a move to actually go and possess what God said it was time to possess, 10 of them stood up and said, now wait a minute. Yes. The land is good, yes, but there's some giants in the land. Yes. The land is wonderful, but the cities are fortified, they're walled up. It looks good, but I don't know if we can really possess this thing. You see, it just seems to be too difficult. But then there was a man named Caleb, who was one of the 12, who stood up in that meeting, looked at those other 10, looked at Moses, and said, we are well able to possess this land. Let's not waste any time. Rise up and possess it. Yes, yes. But usually what happens is that when you get enough nervous folk, they all of a sudden start spreading, not necessarily falsehoods, but they spread their fears to the weak. Because what happened next was the 10 sent out a message saying, I don't think we can do it. And then they over-exaggerated their own fears. There were giants in the land. And we went and we saw them. And we were like grasshoppers in their sight. And we looked at them and saw ourselves as grasshoppers. That's how the information disseminated. And then the rest of the nation, on the verge of a breakthrough, on the verge of a blessing, on the verge of God fulfilling everything he promised, everybody else got nervous and they rebelled against leadership. Yes, yes. Looked at Moses and said, we're going to stone you if you try to take us in.